All right, so welcome to the deep dive. And you guys sent in some really, really interesting stuff this week.
Yeah.
About this 21-year-old Columbia student, Roy, who basically built this AI to ace technical interviews.
Yeah.
And then, everything blew up. So let's just jump right into this.
Roy's story. I think what's really fascinating about this is that it really speaks to, I think, the kind of current anxieties and frustrations around the technical hiring process.
Yeah.
And just like this rapid advancement we're seeing with AI.
Absolutely. So forget your resume tips, right? So we're talking about Roy's app that was apparently designed to be like totally under the radar during these live video interviews, like, you're on a Zoom call or whatever. And it's basically described as this AI assistant that feeds you answers in real time. It grabs screenshots of the interview questions and then uses a large language model to just spit out these realistic sounding solutions that you can then...
That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the technical sophistication there is quite noteworthy. I mean, large language models, as you know, they're trained on these massive data sets of text and code, and they're really capable of producing these surprisingly coherent and contextually relevant responses to all kinds of prompts.
Yeah.
Including, these really specific technical interview questions.
Right.
Especially those that are kind of dealing with well-established algorithms and data structures.
Oh, sure.
And the fact that it could operate so discreetly.
It's crazy.
Even subtly adjusting the window.
Oh, wow.
To avoid detection by eye tracking software.
Oh, my God.
Which is something that these companies are actually using.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So to monitor candidates, are they looking for external help?
Oh, wow.
So that just showcases a clever understanding of the entire interview environment.
So, and it sounds like it was incredibly effective. We're told that Roy, allegedly used this to get offers from Meta, TikTok, Capital One, Amazon.
Big names.
Yeah, I mean, all of them. That's kind of remarkable, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. He then decided to share a video demonstrating how his app worked.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can probably guess what happened next.
Yeah.
But really, if we consider the underlying dynamics at play here, this really highlights this fundamental tension, this intense pressure that people face to succeed in this super competitive job market versus the established protocols and expectations that companies have for hiring.
Yeah, you're not kidding. It was swift and brutal. The fallout here, all those job offers gone. Amazon went into damage control trying to scrub the video off the internet. And the real kicker, Columbia University expelled him. So this guy went from being the hotshot recruit to kicked out of school overnight.
Yeah, and I think that raises a good question, because of all this criticism around these technical interviews, right? How severe were Roy's actions, really?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, was he just pointing out the flaws in this system that everybody...
Yeah, was he a whistleblower in a way?
Or was this straight up cheating? I mean, that's really what we need to dig into.
Yeah.
What does this say about how tech companies are doing these interviews these days? Was Roy some kind of disruptor, right? Showing how absurd this process is? Or was it just cheating and then zooming out? What does this mean for everybody else trying to get a job?
Right.
And for the tech industry as a whole?
Well, the stuff you sent me was definitely very critical of how technical interviews are done today.
Yeah.
And they emphasize this argument that I think, a lot of people feel, which is that this heavy reliance on platforms like LeetCode, with its super intricate focus on data structures and algorithms, often doesn't actually reflect the daily work that a lot of developers are doing in their jobs.
There was this quote that really stuck with me. It said, collectively, developers have wasted billions of hours on this website, mastering complex data structure and algorithm problems to land a job.
Wow.
Tweaking CSS colors and centering divs.
Yeah.
It's so blunt.
Yeah, and that really captures that potential mismatch between what's being tested and what's actually being done on the job.
Totally.
So as the source suggests, this emphasis on these abstract problems might really just be this very efficient way for these companies to sift through a ton of applications in these super competitive fields.
The problem is, though, it creates all this pressure and these barriers for job seekers.
Right.
Even if you've got like a ton of practical experience and demonstrable skills.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine someone with like years of experience building these complex systems. And then they fail an interview because they couldn't like invert a binary tree on the spot.
All right. That's crazy.
Right.
So it's almost like experienced professionals are getting judged on their ability to solve these puzzles that may not even be relevant to the work they're doing.
Yeah.
So given all that, is Roy a disruptor? Is he like forcing this conversation that needs to happen in tech about hiring?
Yeah, I think that's one way to look at it for sure. He's definitely sparked a conversation about whether these technical interviews are even effective or relevant.
Right.
I mean, the fact that the companies and the university
reacted so quickly and so harshly indicates that they do see this as a challenge to their normal way of doing things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, if he was a true disruptor, wouldn't he actually offer some kind of constructive alternative?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Not just exploit a weakness in the system.
Yeah.
So then it becomes a question of like, what was his intention? Really.
Right.
And what are the broader ethical implications?
Exactly. And that's where we get into the ethics of it all. Because regardless of how flawed the interview process might be, is using an AI to get a job offer, is that ethical? I mean, is that crossing the line into cheating?
From the company's perspective, they've set up these rules and expectations for how hiring is done. And he totally like sidestepped all that.
Right.
They probably see it as like a total breach of trust and basically lying about his abilities during the interview.
And, you know, universities like Columbia, they have these really clear policies about academic integrity and using AI to give yourself an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like taking an exam.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a violation.
Yeah.
So the criticisms of these LeetCode-style interviews, they're valid, but I don't think they automatically justify what he did.
No, it's really complicated because questioning a system is one thing.
Right.
But then actively breaking its rules is totally different.
For sure. Okay, so let's think about it from the tech company's perspective for a second. The stuff that we read was pretty critical of how they're doing things, but they probably have a reason for doing it this way.
Right. I mean, you have to acknowledge that in an industry this competitive, with so many people applying for each job, they need a way to filter candidates that's efficient and scalable.
Right.
And maybe emphasizing this like abstract problem solving isn't perfect, but it's a standardized way to at least try to assess, you know, basic problem solving skills and fundamental CS knowledge, even if those exact skills aren't used in every single role.
And I'm sure they just get a crazy number of applications. They need some way to narrow it down.
Yeah.
And it's got to be consistent and objective, right?
Exactly.
But then Roy's app like throws a wrench in all of that.
Yeah.
Because if people can just use AI to get past the technical stuff, then what's the point?
Then the whole interview doesn't really mean anything in terms of figuring out if someone's actually good at the job.
And this leads us to this whole fascinating area of AI in hiring. And I got to say, the irony is not lost on me, that these are tech companies, many of whom are like leading the way in AI. And now their own hiring process is being disrupted by AI. It's crazy.
It's like this poetic justice, as your sources point out, where you have these companies that are trying to automate software development using AI. And now their human hiring is being disrupted by that same technology.
It's amazing.
So it makes you wonder if being able to code is going to be less important as AI gets better at coding. And maybe companies are going to have to start focusing on these higher level skills. Like, you know, being able to define problems, design systems, and communicate well instead of just asking people to code on the spot.
Yeah. So what's the big takeaway here? Is this just like a one-off thing? Or could this be like a sign of a bigger shift in how we think about technical skills?
It really raises this question of,
can these traditional technical interviews even survive in a world where AI can just like game the system. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if AI can pass these tests,
right,
like it did in Roy's case,
yeah,
then maybe the interviews themselves
Yeah.
aren't measuring the right things.
yeah.
You know?
So maybe this will push companies to be like, okay,
Yeah.
what are we actually looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and how can we assess that better?
Right, like through practical projects,
Yeah.
in-depth portfolio reviews,
No.
or even like behavioral interviews
Yeah.
that really dig into how people solve problems, how well they collaborate, and how well they communicate
Yeah.
instead of just their coding skills under pressure.
Right, and it's so interesting because even though he got expelled and all the offers were rescinded,
Yeah.
the stuff we read actually seems kind of optimistic about Roy's future. They even compared him to, like,
Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, who both dropped out of college and became super successful. It's that classic story of the tech innovator who challenges the rules.
Yeah.
And the article said that Roy's app is actually on track to make a ton of money this year.
Wow.
Which tells you that there's a huge demand
Yeah.
for something like this. So even though he got in trouble, he also created something that people want. So is he going to be remembered as like the cautionary tale of what not to do?
Right.
Or someone who exposed a broken system?
Right.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, his story definitely shows how frustrating and how limited technical hiring is today. And it raises these big questions about how we should be using AI in these kinds of situations.
Right.
So if you're listening,
I think the key takeaway is that there's this tension in the tech industry right now where companies want to find and hire talent efficiently. And right now that means these LeetCode-style interviews. But then you have all these candidates who are super stressed out and they feel like those interviews don't really show what they can do.
Right.
And Roy basically took that disconnect and he exploited it.
Yeah, he did it
in a really public way.
very publicly. Yeah.
And his app, even though it was controversial, it showed that you could actually like beat the system. So it makes you wonder, are the skills they're testing in these interviews actually the skills you need to be a good developer? You know?
That's a good question.
And I know we were pretty critical of the tech companies. But you have to remember that they're probably doing this for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, they're dealing with just an overwhelming number of applicants.
So many people applying for each job.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a super competitive industry, so they're trying to find the best people. And this is the system they've come up with, right?
And then in the background of all this, we have this like rising tide of AI.
Right.
And Roy's app really shows us how AI is going to keep changing things. Not just the work that engineers do, but how they get hired in the first place. It might completely change what it means to be qualified for a tech job.
It's wild.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's AI changing how we hire the people who build AI.
Yeah, that's pretty ironic.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So, even though he had a rough time, Roy's story isn't over. His app could end up making him a lot of money.
Yeah.
So he might still find success, just not in the way he expected.
Exactly. Not the traditional route.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to think about this. What skills and knowledge are really valuable in tech today?
Yeah.
Is it just about being able to solve these complex coding problems? Or are there other things that are just as important, maybe even more important, like communication, problem solving, collaboration? That's something to really consider as you're figuring out your own path in this industry.
Yeah, because the industry is changing so fast.
It's constantly changing.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Thanks, everybody.